So I guess now is the point in your story where we start to talk about some of the breaks or some of the cracks emerging. And I don't know if that starts with kind of your awakening, Nan, that you alluded to previously, but where do the cracks start emerging? What are the main factors?
Well, once Sally was married, she came to visit us one time and she said to me something about, Mom, you need to get better at talking about how you feel with Dad and with everybody. And we had some pretty serious conversations, and she kind of woke me up a little bit. And
do you sense what she was worried about? Why she felt that way?
Yeah. She felt like no matter what, I kept quiet about it. And that I didn't express, if Rod was upset about something, then I tried to fix what he was upset about instead of saying, that's your issue, babe. You figure out how you're going to get happy about this. Instead of me feeling like it was my job to change me to make him happy all the time. And Sally said, I'm going to hold you to this, kind of. And she just kind of woke me up on that trip. And I was at a place where I was realizing that I needed to make some changes. Now my two youngest boys were now teenagers. And I was back to feeling like, okay, who am I? I don't have to be a full-time mom. Rod's got his great career going still. And I needed to figure out how to be happier. And so when she talked to me pretty seriously about it, then it helped me to kind of wake up a little. And I quietly found a therapist and went to, of course, an LDS therapist a few times on my own without saying anything to Rod, which was super scary. And then I told him and then invited him to come, and he was so shocked and surprised that I would think we needed to talk to somebody about our marriage. And
this is how many years into your marriage?
So many.
It was probably 2012 about.
Yeah,
then.
so that's 30 years.
We'd been to China, we'd been to Guam, and I had already retired. I had retired from the FBI by then and was working as a contractor for the Department of Energy at Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque.
So 30 years into your marriage, you were stuffing, feeling bad about yourself, not feeling happy, not feeling fulfilled, and not telling anyone. And it was 30
Pretty
years
much.
in.
Yeah.
Okay.
My sister tried to talk to me about that a few years before, and I brushed it off. And but Sally just really, Sally and I were best friends, and so she knows me and knows Rod and loves her dad and wanted us both to be happier. And so she just said to me, "You gotta figure this out now, and I'm going to be calling you all the time, asking you, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you express yourself?"
She was worried about you.
Yeah, she was. She was.
That's a kind of a big deal when an adult child is worried about their parent.
Yeah. She had been married a few years by then, and she recognized that marriage could be easy, and which is a thing she didn't know before.
Could be. Oh.
Because she and Shane were just having the time of their lives. They waited 7 years to have a baby. They were taking surfing trips to Costa Rica and wherever else, and they were loving life, and marriage was good and all of that. And she wasn't stuffing things down. And so she said to me, I've seen enough of marriage to know now that it doesn't have to be the way you don't have to feel like you do, Mom. You need to start speaking up. And so I did. And it was rough on Rod at first, but then he got the hang of it. And it took us a while to work through some stuff and to figure out for me to get able to share my feelings And for him to recognize that I needed things that I hadn't expressed before, and so now he needed to give those to me, and for him to figure that out took a little while, but we did. And it's an ongoing thing, ongoing, forever. But now that I'm awake, and now that I'm, especially most recently, that I'm aware of my value and how I am worth everything just for being me, not for if my house is perfect or if I'm perfect or if my marriage is perfect.
Or your kids.
Or my kids are perfect, then I still have worth. It's helped me to, see things differently and be able to respond differently when there's situations that aren't easy. Yeah. So things are good. Things are always getting better.
And this has to be a very common need or reckoning for Mormon women.
Yeah.
Margie's nodding.
100%. 100%, I think. And the way you described it, I think is so beautiful. And it's like it's like just what you said, where it's a whole process, isn't it? And almost like we talk about sometimes like not deconditioning, but like getting outside our conditioning with regard to faith transition. I think it's true oftentimes in marriage, because that whole decade, like decades long that you've built, relating to each other, how you've related to yourself, that takes a lot of time.
It does.
And it can feel like you're working against gravity, like the way it falls or what you're used to or the patterns. And so you almost, John and I always talk about it a little bit like you have to burn an old version of your marriage down.
That is good advice, really good advice. And I wish I had known that in the beginning, because it started out with me saying, well, if we just do this little thing and if we just do this. But as it's gone on and on, we've recognized that we do have to not only put it behind us, but then don't talk about it either. Because you do it, you get into a dance. And we did our dance for so long that now that we're doing a different dance now, once in a while, we just naturally fall back into the old dance, and we've got to say, get back. This new dance is better, and this is what we both want. So, again, I have to learn how to speak up and say, oh, wait, we're falling back. No, we got to go back to this new dance. So it's going to be a lifetime, forever thing, which is what marriage is supposed to be. Any relationship where you're going to pick one person to be with forever, especially if you think you're going to be with them for all eternity, it should be an ongoing journey where you're always learning and always figuring things out and getting better, which is also a thing I didn't know. I just thought everybody was madly in love with each other and wanted to be together all the time, like my mom and dad. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy that Sally was willing to help me see that and then help hold me accountable to sticking with it until I could be strong enough on my own to figure out what I needed to do.
Way to take care of your mom, Sally. So.
And I love that too, because what's inherent in that is that you had to save yourself. You had to go back to yourself and get to know yourself a little bit.
Yes.
So it's not just your marriage, it's your relationship with yourself too.
Yes. So in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was lucky that I did not have to have chemotherapy, but I did have 7 surgeries. And it was 3 years of pretty much full-time being a patient. And one of the surgeries was extremely extensive, 13 hours long, and I did not recover well. And for the following year, I was miserable. So that was another big step in me learning to express my needs and saying, for the first time in my life, I don't need to go to church if I'm not up to it. Because I probably could have gone and could have got my dress wrapped around all my bandages and gone, which is what I had done up until then. But I started to say, by then I had kind of learned to speak up a little bit and to think about myself instead of putting myself at the back. And I said, I'm not going to go, or I can't do this calling right now. And I had never done that. Before, I would have seen that as a lack of faith. Like, God will heal you from this breast cancer if you just keep going strong and keep doing everything. But instead, I acknowledged that I needed to be responsible for myself and not leave it on God to just make me happy and make everything great. And so in the end, it turned out to be a huge blessing for me, because I did learn a lot through that. And I'm happy for that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the one big shift, was Nan claiming her worth and value and voice.
Yes.
That sounds dangerous to an Orthodox Mormon faith.
It took tons of counseling, tons of therapy, lots of time, introspection. I've got journals this high with writing all my feelings and all of that. But yeah, it was a good thing.
So what was the next domino, or the next
You want to talk about when Alex called us?
Or the mission thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the mission thing.
Yeah. Is that next?
Well, do we want to talk about the faith transition, or do you want to talk about my health?
Chronological.
Okay, chronological.
Yeah.
Okay. We were in Albuquerque, and our older three were married, and they were having kids, and they were doing their own thing, and we had two teenage boys at home, and Alex, our number 2 son, had been married several years. And had a couple of kids. And
you're going to tell him about Sam leaving? That's what you're going to tell him.
Sam had left.
No, you're going to talk about when Sam left on his mission.
Oh, so
that
chronologically.
It was hard for you.
You want me to take care of that first?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay, in 2015. All right.
Yeah.
Alex was still married.
Yeah.
Our son Sam got called to Cambodia, and I had been dealing with, Nan's awakening, and I was stressed about that, I guess. And Sam was called to go to Cambodia, and this was, I was at work. I was, working regularly, and but when it came time for him to leave he was going to leave on a Monday, I think, and on a Saturday before he left, I got really, really anxious, and I had never been in this position before, and
You had never had a feeling of anxiety before.
Oh no, I never felt that before. But when Sam gotten ready, all of the bad feelings I ever had on my mission came rushing back to me.
You alluded to this.
Oh, and everything bad on a mission, and I just could not bear the thought of him having to go through that. And I remember being with him, and I was talking to him. I said, "Sam, you don't have to do this. You don't have to go." And he's going like, "Dad, I want to go. It's time for me to go. I'm going to go." And I actually tried to talk him out of it. Of how weird is that with me, being as faithful and demanding, as a Mormon to him his whole life, now trying to talk him out of a mission. It was
just raised him to want to go.
Oh, I raised him to want to go.
You raised him that there wasn't a choice.
There was no choice, and I didn't experience this with my first 2 boys.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But with him,
was it your fears about Cambodia?
I couldn't explain it. And so I went to church the next day on a Sunday before he was going to leave, and it was a bad day.
Is it okay if I
yeah.
step in?
Add.
So for a couple of weeks before Sam was leaving, you were telling me you thought missions should only be 1 year, and that you were going to write a letter to the prophet and tell him, I think these kids should only go out for 1 year, and that it should start now, and that you were only going to let your son go out for 1 year. And you'd been saying things like that for a couple of weeks. So then when it got time closer and closer, your level of discomfort with him leaving got more and more. And I was like, babe, what's going on here? This is what we've wanted him to do forever. But you got more and more. And then Sunday morning, when we woke up, you made us French toast before school, and you burned one of the pieces of French toast, and you put your head on the kitchen counter and started to cry and cry and cry. I burned the French toast. And
that was not Rod.
I just said, what is happening to you? And I was so
Rod
worried.
Didn't normally cry over French toast.
No, that was not typical.
Yeah, and so we took him to church like a wounded animal we had to care for, and we took him to church, and I took him into the stake presidency. Is that what we did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to see the stake president because he happened to be there.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and he gave me a blessing, I think. And one of my missionary companions from my mission lived in Albuquerque, and he's a great guy, Chad
So
Glines.
I called him and said, help me with Rod.
And so he brought, I don't know how he had these, but he brought
his mission scrapbooks.
His mission scrapbook, and a lot of it had to do with me. We were companions. And all that did was make me worse.
He thought he would remind Rod of all the good.
All the good. He wanted to remind me all the good, but when he brought that over, it just sent me deeper.
And Nan, from your perspective at the time as an observer, what did you see happening with Rod? How would you have described it?
As a nurse, he was having a mental breakdown. In the olden days, we would have called it a nervous breakdown. Mm-hmm. But he was mentally cracking right before my eyes. And the kids didn't know what to do. Sam and Joe were the ones home. They didn't know what to do with it. And Sam would say to me, Dad's not serious about me not going, right? You know, and I'm like, no, go. He'll be fine. We'll work it out. And I saw him falling apart, which he's always been a tough, strong, I can handle anything guy. And then suddenly he's crying over French toast and about the fact that his son is doing what we always wanted him to do, go on a mission. So, yeah.
And the truth is, people die on missions. I've had people close to me die on their missions.
Oh.
They get illnesses or injuries that last a lifetime. And then not to mention the abuse and psychological distress and abuse that can happen. Missions can be horrific experiences, but missionaries are taught never to talk about that. Right. And to the public, it just seems like they're these happy, jolly young men with white shirts and ties.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's something to, and I was telling you guys this at the break, my dad, when I got called to Guatemala, he didn't have a breakdown, but he had a similar reaction in the sense that he's like, why do you need to go on a mission? I'm like, dude, you raised me this way. And he's just like, what if you just went stateside? Like, you know, and I don't know if it was the foreign thing or if he was worried about Guatemala per se, but it turned out prescient because I experienced serious, significant psychological abuse on my mission that Mormon stories probably would have never happened if I hadn't have had the mission that I had. And so all I'm saying is there's history and data that would support a parent being worried. Now, that doesn't mean that had anything to do with your breakdown, but there's credible support for being worried.
I was worried. I was really worried, and I couldn't generate any positive thought about him going on a mission. And I remember, I think he left on a Tuesday. It was a Monday that I went to work. I had to go to work.
And I didn't think I said, you can't drive. The Sunday before, when he had fallen apart about French toast and was crying all day, he never stopped crying. And when we went to church, he wouldn't let go of my hand. So he came in Relief Society with me and held my hand on the back row because he said, I need your hand. And all day long. And so then Monday morning when he said, I'm going to go to work, I'm like, you're not safe to drive.
It was, those thoughts are just awful.
And we didn't talk about your FBI career, but I mean, it's not like you did lightweight things as an FBI agent, right?
Yeah.
You could do 10 hours on his FBI career because
I'll do that
so
if you'll do
good.
it. But I mean, you
I'd
dealt
love to
with,
sometime.
just give us a sense for the type of crimes you dealt with as an FBI agent.
Organized crime, Italian mafia organized crime. I did that for the first 6 years of my career. And then I did a lot of white collar crime after that, fraud, and then I did Chinese stuff. I went to language school, learned Mandarin, and so I did a lot of Chinese related investigations.
Spy stuff.
But not lightweight?
Not lightweight.
He was on the SWAT team for almost 10 years. He was the battering ram guy at the front for a while, busting down houses for drug busts. He was the sniper on the SWAT team, and so he went to sniper school frequently and then was in a lot of, manhunts looking for actual guys who've killed policemen and a bunch of other people, and now Rod and his team have to go find him in the woods in the dark. And just he is the best campfire story guy there is because he has so many good stories.
Margie's like, we totally get it because we've seen The Wire.
Yes.
I was just making eyes at him.
Yeah.
We're on like season 4 of The Wire.
Yeah.
Right now.
It's just
I have a couple
Like,
good
we totally
stories.
get it.
It's just
We totally get it.
Oh, he's got great. The kids are always bugging him to write a book because he has lived all the things you see on TV. Maybe they didn't all happen in 1 hour like they do on TV, but throughout his career.
I would bring you back for Mormon stories if you're able to talk about that stuff.
I can talk about a lot of it.
Yeah.
All right, so Margie, you were going to
So I just wanted to ask you, can you remember what it felt like what you were feeling? And did it feel like you were just kind of hit unaware all of a sudden? What did it feel like for you to be in this space for that long?
It was, you mean in that depressive state, that big anxiety state?
Yeah, and crying and feeling just...
It hurts to even think about it. I'd never felt that before, and I just could not generate a positive thought. I was in, everything was gloom. Everything. I thought, I just wanted to cry all day, all the time, because I didn't see anything joyous about life. Nothing.
Could it have been PTSD from all the stuff you'd seen before or not?
I don't know. I think, I don't know what it was. I broke down at work.
When he went that next day and I let him drive to work.
I broke down at work.
Within 5 minutes of being at the office.
And I took myself into, they had a psychologist on staff there. I just went in there. Well, I went to the doctor, and I was just crying, and so she said, "Okay, this guy's we can't do anything." So she called the psychologist in, and then they called Nan in, and they just said, "Hey, this guy, we got to medicate this guy," and so they gave me some medication, and I took the meds, and they made me feel better at the time. Not better, but so that I could at least get up and walk. And then Sam was leaving the next day, and that was one of the hardest days of my life, even with the medication. But I had to take time off from work, and we went to Sal's house actually in California, and I was there for 2 weeks, and yeah.
So he didn't just feel like crying every day. He cried all day, every day.
Was he pretty stoic prior to all this?
Very.
Like 3 decades of stoicism.
Yes. Yeah. And tough. FBI, oh, that's broken here. I'll fix it for you. Kind of, just always taking charge and being able to do it. And suddenly he's crying. I was taking Spanish classes at the community college. And I said, I'm not going to leave you alone. And he said, as long as you hold my hand, I'll come with you. So he came to Spanish class at night and sat there in the back row holding my hand for weeks. So he took off more than a month of work before he could even go to the office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a very big break.
Thanks for being vulnerable about
Yes,
this.
Yeah.
we so appreciate it.
Yeah, but I got to with medication and with counseling and medication, and I'm still taking medication because since then I had to take it. If you have to take it if you have 2 episodes of that like I had. And I had another episode when Joe left, he left 2 years later. Oh. And so I crashed again.
Same thing.
Really?
And so they say once you do that, you need to take it for the rest of your life. At least my doctor said that. So I'm still taking the medication, but but I got to a point where I could function and went to work and stayed in touch with Sam on his mission. And wrote letters and back and forth. It was still hard for me to imagine him there and the difficulty that he was going through, because it just continued to bring back to me the difficult feelings I had when I was on a mission. It didn't bring back any joyful times, and there were joyful times on my mission. There were times where I had fun, and times when I enjoyed it, but I could not generate any positive thought about a mission. And then, I got somewhat better from that, and then it came time for Joe to go, and I thought I was going to be okay. But when he got his call, the day he got his call, I was taking medication. It just sent me crashing again. And luckily, I didn't go as deep because I was on medication, and they gave me some more medication.
And we knew what to do.
What to do. However, there was a good 3-week period where I was severely depressed when he left. And so I'm still dealing with that now, trying to make it so that I don't ever go back there again.
And when you went in to talk to somebody and ask them what to do about it, tell them what they told you to do.
All right, remind me.
Like church leaders?
Yeah, you went in to talk to a church leader, and
on that Sunday.
Yeah,
when we went in to see the stake president, and I was just awful, and it was, I was not good. And he said, Rod, happiness is a choice. And I wanted to just leave at that moment. That is not what I wanted to hear. And, that was just so... He was just so uninformed. Let's put it that way. There was nothing I could do. I was trying to feel better. It's not like I wanted to feel bad, and I wanted to choose to be this way. Yeah. I could not feel any other way. It was not possible for me to feel any other way. I could not generate a thought that was positive. It was all negative and gloom, and no matter what I did, no matter what anybody said to me, and it was terrible. And,
when the stake president said that to him, I thought it was another step in my waking up to see having faith doesn't fix everything. And that for the stake president to tell him that, he wasn't being seen. He was just, the the church leader that's all he knew to do, was to just tell him, it's a choice. You can choose to be happy. And I remember feeling like all my life, you just need to have faith and it'll eventually get better. But this is a new kind of problem that I've never faced before, and that is not going to work. And there needs to be more than just faith and a blessing and prayers. And that was a little tiny thing in my heart that said, because I always thought that's all you needed, Yeah.
And what never Mormons won't fully understand is when a bishop or a stake president, when a Mormon bishop or stake president gives you counsel, it's not like, okay, he's just being silly, I'm going to ignore that. We're conditioned since infancy to believe that they're speaking for God.
Right.
And that's why it's not just a matter of like dismissing it. It's like, God, why are you telling me through this stake president to just be happy?
It's a choice.
Is that, I don't want to plant
No,
that.
that's
very
totally
true.
right.
It compounds the severity of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, when he fell apart at home over French toast, I said, we need to go see the stake president because
He'll have the answer.
he'll know what
He
to
talks
do.
to God.
I can trust him that he'll give him the right kind of blessing, and his faith with mine will do this thing right,
It's kind of magical thinking.
Yeah.
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 And why don't you go from there to tell them about Alex, which
So,
wasn't very long
While
after
Sam
that.
was on his mission, that our son that Rod first had issues with going, our second son, Alex, called us, and we knew he had read Rough Stone Rolling a while back, and it brought up a lot of questions for him about the church. And so
was he already on a mission? Had he not gone yet? I'm
No.
a little bit.
Okay. So Sam, he was
Sam was on.
Yeah, he's one of the two younger boys.
Okay.
The three oldest are married. They've got kids. They've got careers.
So Alex had come back from his mission.
Alex was married with children.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. He was married with children
Yes.
while Sam's on his mission. He's reading Rough Stone Rolling.
Yeah.
Post-mission,
Yes,
post-marriage
right.
with children. Okay, thank you.
Had a great Mormon marriage with a couple little boys. All is going down the straight and narrow path. And he called and said, I want to talk to both of you. And we both got on the phone. And he said, he had a spiel that he had practiced and we could tell. And he said, I had a great childhood and you guys were awesome parents. And he told us all those good things. And he said, I recently read this book, and then which led me to this one, which led me to this. And then I've been reading about this and listening to this podcast. And he said, I don't believe the church is true anymore. And I'm not going to attend. I'm going to step away. And we were both speechless.
This is 2015?
2015.
Okay.
And we were like, what do you mean you're not going to go anymore? What do you mean you think the church isn't true? Oh, Alex, we can explain everything. Just tell us what you've read and we'll explain. So the phone call was really upsetting. And I knew his wife well, and she didn't feel that way. She was not on board with this. And we were just, I felt like all of my mothering just got flushed down the drain. Everything I'd ever taught him was all based on this is the path that you need to take to be happy. And he was willfully choosing to step off of it. And it was, I cried for weeks. And I dreamed up every terrible thing that was going to happen to him and his family because of this. And we had already planned to go visit them. They were living in Mexico for his job. And so we went down there to visit him, and it had only been a few weeks since he told us. And he wanted to talk about it, but the only talk we could do was to tell him, oh, Alex, if you'll just hold still, we'll explain to you why you've been so misled. What about this scripture? What about that experience you had? What about your mission? And I told him face to face, you've just flushed 20 years of my efforts trying to be the best mother and teaching you everything. I taught you everything you needed to know to live your life on the covenant path. And I said, how you expect to raise kids without even the church? It's hard enough to do it with the gospel. Doing it without it, you're never going to have success. Your marriage is going to fall apart. Your kids are going to be on drugs. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, and you're just not seeing it clearly. You're like a preschooler compared to God. God knows everything. He's got a plan. You just need to remember that you're only in preschool, and if you just wait and learn little by little after this life, you'll see that God has a plan. And I told him all of that, which, of course, was everything you should not tell a kid. And I'm really thankful that the cameras weren't rolling then, because it was, inappropriate and unhealthy in every way for me to say all that to him. But it was...
It's what you really believed, though.
It was what I believed. And talk about expectations
and it's a very standard,
versus
traditional response for Orthodox believing Mormons. And even after I lost my faith, my brain told me all those things about my own children. And that's why Margie and I stayed in the church for another 13 years after we stopped believing.
Wow.
Well, at least for me, because my brain told me the exact same things you told your son. Does that make sense?
You can't raise a kid outside the church.
No, they can't raise a healthy, moral, happy kid outside of the church. There's no way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was all happening when I was, still not great.
Yeah.
And for Nan, what did it?
And then another month went by, and Sally called, and our son Alex was best friends with Sally's husband at the time, and apparently, we didn't know this, but for the last couple of years, they had been talking to each other, reading the same books, all the things. And Sally's husband had been mentally out. And after causing some rocky spots in their marriage, they went to a counselor. And the counselor basically said, Sal, you got to at least read some of this stuff before you can just argue that he shouldn't be reading it. And so she read the CES letter and some other things, and she called and told us the same things. My childhood was really good. You guys were great parents. Thank you for raising me the way you did. And then she just cried and cried. I'm so sorry, but I don't believe. I'm so sorry. And the conversation didn't last very long. And then we went
Meaning you didn't want to keep talking?
She was just crying, saying how sorry she was, and she knows what a disappointment she is to me and all of that. And then we already had plans to see her for Christmas. So this was just Thanksgiving and then Christmas. So we went to her house on Christmas. And in my heart, I was hoping that it would go okay. And so I brought my nativity props that I always bring, that we do on Christmas Day. And I brought, my Christmas storybooks about the nativity to read to Sally's kids. And then we got there, and it was very apparent that that's not what they wanted. So we didn't read Luke chapter 2, and we didn't act out the nativity for the first time in our family history. And I went to bed on Christmas Eve and cried all night because, oh my gosh. And I talked to Sally about it and and I didn't want to respond the same way I did to Alex, but I still believed all that 100%. And so I talked to her and I said, if you're going to stay living here in California, their friends are going to get baptized. What are you going to do then? Well, we're going to still be friends with all our same Mormon friends. And anyway, it was another rough visit. And it took me quite a while, and Rod too, before we could think about them and not be really, really worried.
How about disappointed?
Oh, so disappointed. I had already stitched CTR in green letters on a white bath towel for our oldest granddaughter to get baptized, and our other kids. And I had, just like I raised my kids with inserting the gospel in every way that I could, I did that with my grandkids as well. So I was constantly reading them faith-promoting stories and telling them stories of my pioneers and all of that. And all of that came to an abrupt halt. And then it wasn't, I don't know, a few months, maybe a year later when our oldest son called and said the same thing. So
that's 3 out of 5
within about a year.
Within a year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're not the only parents that had this happen.
Yeah.
Because 2015 is when things start really getting serious for people leaving Mormonism. I mean, the exclusion policy, there were several excommunications that happened in 2014, 15.
Yep.
The Gospel Topics essays come out in 2014. The CES letter comes out shortly thereafter. And with the exclusion policy, and ordained women happened.
Yeah.
Like by 2015, 2016 is when the church starts seeing this massive decline. And that's when it hit you guys.
For sure. And what we did was double down. And, Sally has taught me that when you rock the boat, the other people in the boat hold on tighter to the boat because they don't want it to rock anymore. And they just get a tighter grip and a tighter grip. And boy, we did that. You want to talk about how we tried to talk to them?
Sure. In doubling down, I mean, 2015 is when I discovered Bill Reel. I started listening to his podcast. He was still faithful at the time. And I started listening to him because I wanted to get information that I could use to help get my kids back. Then I started reading. Material, of course, that was BYU scholarship. I still, at that time, there's no way I would ever read anything that wasn't approved by the church to read, or anything that I thought was not favorable to the church, because that's what I'd been trained to do, right? And that's what faithful people do. They don't read that stuff. So I was really familiar with the fair Mormon arguments, and I did a few emails to the kids where I said, okay, this is why the church is right, and I would give them arguments, and to their credit, they were very kind. They didn't send anything nasty back to me. They just let it go, and mostly didn't respond. But it was a difficult time for both of us. When Nan and I would drive down to California, and we would talk about these things, she would cry halfway down, and cry
to visit the kids.
To visit the kids, because the kids, we had 2 families of kids that were in California. It was about a 6-hour drive to go to LA from Livermore, where we lived, and she would cry halfway down and then cry halfway back up,
After we left Sally that first time at Christmas, and we had several talks, Sally said to me, Mom, what if she said, what if I always believed in Santa Claus because you taught me to believe in Santa Claus? And then one night on Christmas Eve, I saw that it was Dad that came in and left all the presents. And I knew for sure that there wasn't Santa Claus. How am I supposed to believe in Santa Claus again? And I said, that's silly. That's not the same. And she said, well, if I came to you and told you that, what would you tell me to do? And I said, I would have your vision checked. Because you probably didn't see Dad come in and leave those presents. You probably just imagined that. So I would go get a vision test.
That's the first time I've heard that one.
When I think about that now, what's that?
Really? That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
What did she say?
She just shook her head. And, I knew she was like, oh, give up. But that is how I felt.
Wow.
And, so then we got back in the car and drove 6 hours back home, and I cried all the way, and I said, Sally thinks this isn't going to change our relationship. How is that even possible? What are we going to talk about now? The weather? Is that all I can talk about now for the rest of my life with my daughter, my one and only daughter? I can't say, oh, this is what I taught in Relief Society today. And she's not going to call and say, what do you think I should teach my daughter about this thing or that. Or I said, we talk about the church all the time. She was a gospel doctrine teacher at the time, Sally was, and she was really good. And she would call me every week. Do you have a story about this I could use? And we just bonded over every church thing. And I just thought, okay, that's all down the drain, all of it.
She was despondent.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was.
It was very hard.
I talked to a dear friend that we'd been friends for 20 years, and she had kids the same age, and she had a couple of hers leave around the same time. And I heard about that, so I called her, and the two of us talked on the phone and just lamented. And she said it was the single hardest thing of her whole life. And
you had cancer.
Yeah.
And 7 surgeries.
Yeah.
And Rod, you had a mental breakdown.
So hard.
It's not like you had an easy life necessarily, right?
No, it was just, I have to say that I wasn't worried about their eternal salvation a ton. And I think that's because I knew them so well. They were such good people, and they were doing such good things with their lives. Both of them were very generous with their time and their means for other people who needed help. And I just knew all those things about them. So in my heart, I didn't think, oh, I'm not going to ever see them after this life. But I was very worried about this life and what would happen to them. Yeah. I just thought the world had come to an end. I stayed in my bathrobe for weeks and didn't go to church. And some friends came over after church one week, like, how come you're not showing up? And I just started crying. Our kids left the church. Yeah. It was
difficult.
Really hard.
But I doubled down on my study, and for us it was difficult that they were gone and they had a brother on a mission, and so it was hard for me in that I knew they weren't supporting him on his mission like they would have done had they still been faithful Mormons, and they could have made him feel a lot better about being out there. He didn't get that. They were wise enough to know that, hey, we're not gonna bother Sam while he's out there because it would just make things really hard for him. They were kind to their brother in that way, but it was a difficult couple of years, and then it was time again. Now once he came back 2 years later for Joe, our youngest, to go. And Joe went to Australia, and spoke Vietnamese. And again, that's when I had another breakdown. And then it was when Joe was on his mission that Sally came out. And that was...
Came out as what?
As gay. And that created a whole new level of concern for us.
Mm-hmm. So
can I ask one quick clarifying question? Mm-hmm. So one of the, I had world cult expert Stephen Hassan here.
Yes.
Just a couple weeks ago, and I don't think he understands a lot about cults. I think there's a lot about Mormonism that he doesn't quite understand.
Right.
Partly because most Mormons don't join as adults, having had an entire life before. Mm-hmm. We're raised since babies. Right. And one of the things that I think a lot of outsiders won't understand is if you've raised as parents, so you're 30 years into your marriage by this point, you've raised
35 years.
35 years.
Yeah.
You've raised really smart, kind, loving kids. What might seem logical to an outsider is, oh, your adult children learn a bunch of stuff, read books, have life experiences. They're like close friends that you trust. They come to you and say, hey, Mom and Dad, we've got some new knowledge. We've learned some things about the church. We've realized that we love you and we care about you, but like this thing that you raised us with, it's not what we thought. We want to share it with you. Mm-hmm. Like in a rational mathematical world, a parent would go, oh, I trust and love you. You're smart. You wouldn't be doing this unless you had good reasons. teach me everything that you know. And so we can, but that's not what happens, right? So can you explain to our never Mormons or to Orthodox members who are inclined to react as you did as a way to validate, why wasn't that your reaction? Tell me more.
Well, that would have been my reaction if my kid said, I want to start wearing, a different kind of clothes every day. Or I think we're going to start eating only food from India. Then I could say that and say, tell me all about it. I trust you that you think this is a good idea. Let's hear about it. But this was not just anything. This was their eternal salvation. It's in their DNA. It's in my DNA from all my pioneer ancestors. And now it's in theirs. And I taught it to them with everything I had in my power to teach them what would bring them happiness and what was the right way. I mean, it wasn't some little thing, we've found this new information, we're going to do this. To a person who's never been Mormon, I'm sure there's really no way they can get it. But to me, it was 100% of everything. It would have been much easier to hear one of them got divorced or one of them, had this big problem or disease or whatever. It would have been easier for me to accept, far and away easier than this. This was the end of the world as I knew it.
It's a totalistic lifestyle. Theology, doctrine, lifestyle, it's totalistic.
But I was curious.
Isn't it?
Yes.
I'm curious if part of the way you experienced it too is because of the responsibility that's placed on the mother in particular. So it's literally like you're a failure. You have failed at the one job that you were given. Is that part of why?
Yes. I was taught being a mother is the measure of my creation. It is the purpose of my life on earth to bring children into this world, to teach them the straight and narrow way, and to help keep them on that as they grow up until they die, so that we can all be in heaven together and there will be no empty chairs in my family circle in heaven. That was my responsibility. And Rod did everything he could while he was home, but I was there with those kids far, far more. And
It reflects more on you than on him.
Yes.
It does.
Yes. And I had spent so many hours. I mean, I can remember thinking about laying in bed at night and going from being sad to being angry to being hurt and all the things. And I thought, all those family home evening lessons that I worked so hard on are all in vain. We never missed family prayer, ever. We hardly ever missed family scripture study, even when the teenagers would come home from a date and they'd be so tired, or from work, and we'd be like, we'll only read a few verses, but we're not going to miss. You know what the promise is from the prophet. So we would read the scriptures. I used to lay there and think, all of that was for nothing. What didn't I do? What more could I have done? I tried. I gave it my all. I wasn't a mom who said, I'm too tired to read scriptures with you kids tonight. No way. I was in it. And to think that they were willfully just choosing to step away from that. As a matter of fact, I asked Sally just recently, I said, if we came to you kids when you were, 10 or 12 or 14 or 16 and said, we don't believe anymore and we think you kids should quit going to church, I said, how would you have felt? She said, I'd have been so upset. I'd have been mad at you guys. I would think, who have you been listening to, Mom and Dad? You can't do that. And I believe all of my kids would have said that. They weren't the kind of kids who would just say, oh, cool, now I don't have to go to church anymore or early morning seminary. No way. I had been successful at putting it in them, and I knew that. And now they were choosing to let it go.
And it was not only an attack on the church, it was an attack on your success as a Mormon mom.
Yes.
After spending 35 years doing only that.
doing only that. Yeah. It was really hard. Yeah. And I spent a very long time being distraught about that.
Yes.
I think I cried more than you because of that.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because it was all on
it's,
me.
it's not the same for a dad. I was upset, and I was determined to study and find out everything I could to try to, argue in favor of the church in a way that they would understand and come back. I did that. I did that until Sally came out as gay.
So let's talk about that. Mormons are taught that being, the sexual sin, and I'm just saying in Mormon words, that sex outside marriage or homosexual sex is next to murder in evil or in wickedness. And we're one of the most outspoken and public and strongest anti-LGBTQ powers and forces in the United States. And that's saying something. So what was your reaction as faithful, Orthodox believing Mormon parents to Sal coming out as gay?
So I had enough time to see how poorly I responded when they left the church. And I'd had enough time to sit with that and recognize that I was wrong and that I should have responded in the way you just described, John, like, oh, tell me more about that. I respect you and your choices. I would like to know more about that. And I had begun to apologize to the kids about my reaction and say, I wish I could have a do-over because I would do it so much differently. And I told them that so many times. When Sally called, she texted me and said, Mom, I need to speak with you. She'd been out of the church for 2 years. I need to speak with you about something pretty big. Let me know when you have a chunk of time, not just 5 minutes.
And y'all were best friends, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh my gosh, what's this going to be? And what? I didn't know, are they getting a divorce? Is she really sick? Is one of the kids got something wrong with them? And I had a couple of hours before it was time for us to have a phone call. And so right before the time to have the phone call, she texted me again. And she said, I would like to do the talking. Please don't ask me any questions. Whoa, then I even more didn't know. So she called me. Hey, Mom, this is really hard. And then she started to cry. And she probably cried for 5 minutes. And then she just said, I'm gay. And I knew in a heartbeat, I knew the minute she started to cry that it was my chance for a do-over. I had prayed so hard that my kids would forgive me for the poor way that I acted when they left the church, and I knew that this was a way I could show them that I wasn't the same person. And I knew it was my chance. And I'm really grateful that Sally gave me, she front-loaded me with those 2 texts so that I was prepared. And I sat there on the phone in my car in the parking lot, and she told me she was gay. She said our conversation didn't last a long time, and I didn't ask any questions. And I, told her I loved her, and I will always love her, and I'll love her no matter what, which now I've learned that's not an appropriate response either. But at the time...
Because it's like, I love you in spite of this awful thing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
She later told me, she said, if I had just won the lottery, would you say, oh, I'll love you no matter what, even if you win the lottery? No, she said, you only say that if it's something bad. Yeah. But I said the few things I could think of to say nice, and then she just said, please don't call me. I'll be the one to call you back when I'm ready to talk more. And I said, okay. And then I hung up, And then I started to cry. And then I called Rod and said, come home from work. I got to talk to you. And he came home from work and I told him, and he was like, this can't be. I'll let you talk now.
Yeah. What was your response, Rod?
Yeah, that was a hard day. Yeah, Nan, I was at work and Nan called, said, hey, Rod, you need to come home right now. And I said, what is it? And she says, I'll tell you when you get home. So I was scared, I thought, oh crap, what's going on here? So I dropped what I was doing and I came home. It was only like, I was only 10 minutes away. So I got there and she was on the couch and she was crying. And I said, what is it? And she said, Sally is gay. And of all the things I thought it might be, it wasn't that. And I did not know what to think, other than the first thought that came to my mind was that she can't be thinking she's going to divorce Shane.
Because they seem to have had a very good friendship.
They were good friends.
And we love Shane so much, so much.
I don't know how good a marriage they had, but they were good friends. They did a lot of stuff together.
In our view, we thought their marriage was good.
Yeah, well, we didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know all the difficulties that come with, mixed orientation marriage. But I needed... First of all, I thought I needed an Ativan. I don't know if I took one or not, because it was very upsetting. And I remember, okay, I got to get out of here.
We talked for a while.
Yeah, we talked for a little while, and then I needed to get out because I needed to be by myself and think about this. So I remember driving. I drove back in the hills, in the Bay Area, and I parked and just... I think I cried for a while. And I was there for about 40 minutes. And then I came back home and I talked to Nan. Okay, what are we going to do? And I was skeptical because we had no clue. I mean, there was never any thought that she might be gay. We had, and so what I did, like a dummy, was say, okay, does she really know about this? I don't believe her. I don't think she's gay. She needs to go see a counselor. She needs to go and she needs to make sure that, she's right here. Because, look at all you're going to lose if you say you're gay.
And she grew up with brothers, and just because she's an athlete doesn't mean she's gay, and I
said, wait a minute, she had boyfriends in high school. She had a crush on Justin Bieber. Justin Timberlake. Come on, she's never had a relationship with a girl. She's
One
never
of the
indicated.
Justins.
Yeah, she's never done anything like that. Come on, she's got to be wrong. She needs to go get that fixed.
Which actually, I have to say, this does make sense with a combination of kind of church, right, conditioning, but also culturally how we've been talking about it, until just recently. I feel like I don't know, cultural discourse has been very much like you can tell. Mm-hmm. There's a tell.
Yeah.
Which we now know that is not true. Any more than,
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we still get gender mixed up with
sexuality.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's confusing. So sorry, just wanted to jump in and say, hey, yeah.
Yes, I was totally ignorant. I tell a story of deep regret of a friend of Sally's that we knew was in my quorum where I was a teacher of priests, which are, 16 to 18-year-old boys. And I knew that this kid was gay. I just, it was pretty obvious. And we talked about it. And I remember giving a lesson to him saying that We all have our challenges in life. Some people, have a problem with lying. Some people are dishonest.
Some people are alcoholics.
Some people are gay. It's just something that you have to overcome in this life. I gave that lesson knowing that he is there listening to me. That is a giant regret in my life, but that's how uninformed I was. And so unfortunately, I expressed those sentiments to her husband, to Shane. I said, let's make sure that she really knows what she's talking about. Let's get her to a counselor. And then it didn't take very long for him to come back to me and say, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want you to say anything to Sally. I don't want you to say anything to me. You are off limits to us. And they shut me out. They shut me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was wise,
Yes.
in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the time, that probably didn't feel very safe.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
And so they shut me out.
Yeah.
And I didn't have much of a choice to say anything or not.
And you were just reacting as you were taught
Yeah.
and believed.
Yeah. I did.
But luckily,
And it can still do harm.
Of course.
Yeah. Which
yeah.
those boundaries are so needed sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a great response from Dad initially.
Yeah, initially, only initially. I was able, because I'd had 2 years of thinking and learning and regretting my reaction when they left the church, and then observing their very happy, well-adjusted lives outside of the church, which I didn't think was possible. I don't know why I didn't think that was possible. It's not like I'd been hiding under a rock my whole life, but I didn't think that was possible. And I remember watching General Conference one time, not long before Sally came out, and one of the speakers said, you cannot be happy without the church. There's just no way if you leave the church for you to be happy. And I remember thinking, at that time, I had 3 kids who were out of the church, had been out for at least 2 years, and were very happy and living very good lives and being equally as kind to the world and as generous with their means and their talents as they ever were when they were in. And I remember watching that guy
I think they were happier when they were out than they were in.
And I said to myself, you are wrong. I have living proof that you are wrong in what you're saying. And then later that day, I thought, if he is 100% wrong on that, maybe I don't have to live by every word that comes out of his mouth. And I thought I did. And I was the kind who took tons of notes during General Conference, and then we'd have family home evening lessons based on what the talks were and all that. And I sat there in that conference and thought, I'm not going to write all this down. My kids are doing just fine. They're all really happy and life is good. And we do have things to talk about. And the world didn't come to an end. So therefore, because of that experience, because I'd had 2 years, I was able to respond to Sally coming out, at least when I was with her, in the way you just described. Tell me more. What can I do to help? What do you need from us? We love you. This doesn't change anything. And then, of course, when I wasn't with her or on the phone with her, then I would hang up and express my concerns to Rod. But it wasn't an end of the world thing for me, like when they left the church. Because a little bit of me thought, they've already thrown away the towel. They've already thrown in the towel. They've already stepped off the straight and narrow. What's one more thing off? This is just another part of their off the path lives. It didn't seem to me it was going to make a big difference as far as eternity, because they were already out. So I had lots of concerns and all of that, but I didn't cry myself to sleep at night for weeks on end.
It's just kind of the opposite with me, When they left the church, she was totally devastated. I was unhappy, but I wasn't despondent like she was. when Sally came out as gay, she handled it better, and I thought, oh crap, this is the end of the world. So we kind of had opposite responses, and yeah.
I think part of it, did you think there was still a chance we were going to get him back to the church?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there was a long time left, and there, you know, they can learn. You know, there's always a chance. But when you're gay, you're not undoing the gay. So,
yeah.
Yep.
yeah. And I was, you know, I was just ignorant.
And from that, it's been a steep learning curve ever since then.
Okay, yeah. And before we jump into that, I just wanted to make one observation. And we've kind of covered this, but I just want to really drive it home. And I think about this because I have two sisters, one who's passed away, but who passed away after pretty much all her children either came out as gay or left the church.
I'm sorry.
And so she died faithful, feeling like she was a disappointment and her kids were a disappointment.
Oh.
So she didn't get the awakening part.
Yeah.
She just got I gave my life to the church. I raised my kids in the church, and now all three of my kids have left the church. I'm a failure.
Yes.
And then she died, you know. And then my second sister, who's still alive, we're on good terms, but let's just say many of her children are no longer faithful. And they were, again, flawless Mormon parents in many ways. No one's flawless, but
right.
And then even, you know, my brother's in a mixed faith marriage, and I'm thinking now of my sister-in-law who's still super Orthodox and believing, or your mom, or Margie's mom, you know, 6 kids, maybe one still in the church out of 6. Like there's such a beauty and a simplicity to the train, to the way, to the totalistic Mormon plan for parents and children. It seems so beautiful, so simplistic, so lovely.
Why would anyone not want that?
Yeah, but this dream becomes a nightmare because inevitably it's all about eternal families. It's all, like you said, it's all about no empty chairs. It's all about everybody making it back, and that's the whole proposition. But everybody's got to make it back, or what we thought was happy, wonderful heaven becomes sad, tragic heaven.
Yes.
Because some or all don't come back. And so I'm just thinking how this Mormon train, way, dream, promise, just for almost everyone, inevitably becomes a nightmare. Because especially in 2023, half or more of your children will leave the church and or come out as gay or lesbian or LGBTQ in some way.
Yeah.
Half or more.
Yeah.
And this is people who were raised in Utah. This is families that were, you know, stake presidents and Relief Society presidents and families of general authorities. You're all toast. Your plans, your dreams are all toast because half or more of your kids are going to leave. And what I'm really trying to say is how that sets up the parents for major disappointment in their golden years, in their midlife and in their golden years, as everything they work for decades completely unravels and falls apart.
Thank you for stating all of that. That validates my feelings at the time and how big it was to me. There was nothing bigger, and it was really big.
Yeah.
It's a setup. It's not intentionally a setup, but the way it plays out in people's lives is it's a setup for feeling like a failure and like your life was a failure.
And how many can actually, you know, how many parents actually get through life without an empty chair, without dying thinking there is going to be an empty chair?
Yeah.
Not very many.
My youngest son said to me not long ago that the doctrine of eternal families does more damage to families than it ever has done good. And I was, you know, a believing member when he said this to me. And I said, Joe, what are you talking about? You know, that's not true at all. And he said, Mom, I think he was talking about one of his older brothers, and he said, from the time they made their first decision that wasn't what you wanted or wasn't something the church would have said was okay, they knew from that time on they had messed up the family plan, and that they knew, oh, there's a chance I might be that empty chair in heaven, and they knew it.
Or that we're the ones screwing it up for our parents.
Exactly.
And for our whole family.
Exactly.
We're the ones that are going to break it and ruin it.
Right. And I said to Joe, you were only 2 years old when your brother left on his mission. You don't know that's how he felt. You weren't even in the same home with him only for a couple of years. And he said, it was in the air that I breathed. And that just broke my heart to think that he knew from a young age that that's how his brother felt, that I was disappointed, that his brother lived with that all his life. You know, we prayed for his brother to choose the right, every prayer from the time he was little, from the time Joe was little, and he said, you didn't have to say that to me, Mom, but I knew it just from being in our family. Wow, that was another light bulb moment for me to have to recognize the truth of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and that was the catalyst for me.
What was, Sally?
Sally's coming out was the catalyst for me to look behind the curtain. To say BYU scholarship hasn't given me the answers, so I need to find out what's going on here, because I'm not going to be happy if she's not with me, you know, later on. I had a Temple Recommend interview really closely after Sally came out, and I remember talking with counselor in stake presidency, a guy that I truly admire and who's an awesome person. Even to this day, I truly admire him. And I said, hey, you know, what's going to happen with my daughter? She's gay and she's going to leave her husband. And he didn't have an answer, but he did say it'll all work out. And I did not want an argument at that time, so I just let that go and just answered the rest of the questions. And but I was thinking, well, that's not what we teach. You know, that's not satisfactory. That's not what we teach. And so that was when I started listening to Mormon stories. That's when I started reading materials that weren't, correlated. I started listening and reading to Dan Vogel and, David Bockavoy and Michael Quinn and, reading everything I could think of. Because it didn't take long after I looked behind the curtain to realize, whoa, there's a lot here that I didn't know before, and it is shocking to me.
And Rod, I always like to slow down a little bit for this, just to give people a flavoring of the types of things you learned.
Okay.
So pick 5 to 7 major things that you thought were X, but you found out were Y.
Okay.
Just so that people have an idea of what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, the first thing I did was Nan bought me the Leonard Arrington diaries. And she was still 100% faithful at the time.
So were you.
Was this the Greg Prince book?
So were you.
Was this the Greg Prince book?
This was Leonard's diaries.
So it was signature books.
It was signature books edited by Gary Bergera.
So
3
you were
fat volumes.
You were a faithful Mormon giving him Leonard Harrington's diaries from signature books?
I had heard about the books, and they had a lot of good church history in them, and I knew he was suddenly obsessed with church history, so I thought that was a great birthday
Awesome,
present.
yeah. We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yes.
That's great stuff, yeah.
I devoured those volumes, and they were eye-opening to me. I learned through his diaries that the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12, even though they say they do nothing unless they are entirely in lockstep and all have had a similar confirmation from the Lord before any policy is enacted, that is not true. That they act more like a board of directors than, they profess, that the senior members of the leadership hold the power, and those who are junior members listen and obey.
And collect their chocolates last.
Exactly. So
Chocolates are administered by seniority.
yes. And so, that was very apparent to me in reading those diaries. And the diaries led me to other church history things, and particularly in reading. I've read the book Nauvoo by Benjamin Park. I've read all 3 Mountain Meadows Massacre books.
So John wants to know, name 5 things that you learned that you didn't know before.
Okay. Well, the leadership of the church, and that it's more like a board of directors than anything else. I learned that Joseph Smith was very much involved in occult practices, that he was very much involved in treasure digging, that his family was known to the community where they lived as a treasure digging family, and that Joseph started at a pretty early age and didn't finish that until 1826, when he was called into court and prosecuted and actually convicted.
And for those who don't know, this is illegal activity.
It was illegal activity in New York, and
it's not just searching for buried treasure. It's claiming that there are spirits guarding the treasure, and
it's
using
the fraud.
occult and folk magic to make people believe you have special powers. It's for those who don't know. It's it's that kind
and it was called being
scryer, peeper, glass looker.
Yes, and it's because you commit fraud when you do that. You deceive people, and that was apparent to me that that was the truth, and the reason that the Smith family left Palmyra and that area and moved to Kirtland. I learned a lot about Joseph. I learned about the Kirtland Banking Society, where Joseph and Sidney Rigdon, who was a member of the First Presidency, decided to start a bank because the church was poor, and they did a little shady business in forming a bank where they printed money and gave away a lot of promissory notes, et cetera. And of course, the bank ended up failing. And not only were church members upset because they were heavily invested, but many of the local community were invested in it. And effectively, that drove Joseph out of town, and that drove the Mormons from Kirtland, Ohio, to Missouri. And so I learned there that Joseph started his life as a fugitive because he was indicted later. It seemed to me that everywhere he went, he was being chased by the law after that time. Then another very disturbing thing was the Nauvoo period, where Joseph started polygamy. And what was particularly disturbing to me was that he used his authority, his complete power. He demanded total loyalty from those who followed him, and those who weren't totally loyal were excommunicated. But he used his power to get his closest associates to lie to the majority of his own people. Because when he started doing polygamy, he got others to join him in polygamy, forced them effectively, saying that polygamy is the celestial law and you can't get to heaven unless you are a polygamist, and you must join me. So in my estimation, to mask his illicit activity, he wanted to get others to join him so that he would have this inner circle of people that were committed to him, and also secret, because polygamy was secret. It was against the law. Not only did he keep it from the law, but he kept it from the general population of the Mormons. And in doing that, he forced young girls to marry him, in the sense that he told them, and remember, this is a guy who says, I speak for God, and they believed that he spoke for God. He spoke for God, and he was the only one on the earth that could speak for God, and told them that if you don't marry me, it's God's will that you marry me. And it's your own choice, if you don't marry me, that you're going to suffer the consequences of God. Even with telling them that an angel came to me with a drawn sword and said that if you don't participate in this marriage, that you will be destroyed.
Joseph.
Joseph would be destroyed if the woman didn't marry him. Now,
It's manipulative.
It's so manipulative, so coercive. The story of Zina Huntington is heartbreaking. When Joseph started his polygamy, right before he married his first wife in Nauvoo, he said he married his first wife in 1835 with Fanny Alger, but that's another story. But a young girl by the name of Zina Huntington was in Nauvoo. He approached her about marriage in 1841, and she said no. She told him no. He told her about polygamy. He was, of course, married to Emma at this time, and she said no. And because she had another boyfriend, Henry Jacobs, and 6 months after that, she married Henry Jacobs. She asked Joseph to marry them. Joseph agreed to marry them, but never showed up to the marriage. And they had to be married by Brigham Young. This was a civil marriage. And then sometime soon thereafter, she saw Joseph, said, hey, Joseph, why did you not come and perform our marriage? And he said, I couldn't bear to marry you to someone else when you're supposed to be married to me. Those are her words for her from her diary. And 6 months later, Joseph convinced her to marry him. When she had chosen, and you think of, Russell Nelson.
Current Mormon prophet.
Saying to a girl that just got married, to her boyfriend, the love of her life, someone that she chose to marry, and he said, you should have married me instead of him. How would she feel? I mean, that would be such a holy cow. The prophet of God is, even though I'm happily married to this guy, the prophet of God is telling me that I shouldn't have married him and married the love of my life, but instead I have to marry him. And he continues to push it until I do marry him. And that's what Joseph did. he should have said, I am so happy for you. I hope you have a great marriage. If he was a kind, generous person, how selfish is that of him to force her to marry him, even though he knows she was happily married to this other guy?
Unless it was God.
Unless it was God, yes. And even to make matters worse, Joseph dies. Zina Huntington, Brigham Young, even though Zina Huntington already has 2 children by Henry Jacobs, and she's pregnant 7 months with his child, Brigham Young calls them into the temple, tells Zina Huntington, I am going to marry you, and makes Henry Jacobs be a witness to Brigham Young marrying Henry Jacobs' wife in the temple and forcing him to be a witness. Wait a minute. She's already sealed to Joseph. She already has a husband that she loves and is 7 months pregnant with the child. And Brigham Young is taking her away from a husband that loves her with all his heart. How cruel can you be? How is that inspired in any way? Oh, that just thinking of that just makes my skin crawl. How can you do that? Well, he did it. What did he do? He sent Henry Jacobs on a mission. They leave Nauvoo. When he comes back, she's not his wife anymore. He wrote her letters. He tried to say, and she never answered the letters. When they left Nauvoo, she went to live with Brigham's other wives. And Henry came back, wanted to get back with his wife. No go. She was now Brigham's wife. You go find your own wives now. How is that the way any God with a heart would work? That just made my blood boil. And it even this day, just thinking about it. How could the God that I believed in be that way? How could he inspire a prophet to do what Joseph did and inspire a prophet to do what Brigham did? No God that I would believe in. And another thing, until 1852, Joseph and Brigham were sending missionaries to England. Half of the church, half the population of the church was in England. And many of those were young girls. The apostles were sent to Europe to preach the gospel. In 1850, John Taylor had a debate with a famous French pastor. And the debate ended up being about, hey, you guys practice polygamy. John Taylor, who at that time had several wives, denied that he practiced polygamy to this pastor. He said it is abhorrent. Even though he had several wives at that time.
He later becomes the third Mormon prophet.
Yes, he became the third Mormon prophet.
Yeah.
That speech that he gave was someone took notes, that was put into a tract and published by Orson Pratt in England, and that was a tract that they used to get converts to come to Zion. They denied polygamy. Polygamy is evil. They pointed to the Doctrine and Covenants, which said at that time that one man and one wife is God's way. And that was in the Doctrine and Covenants and was not eliminated from the Doctrine and Covenants until 1874 when they published a new Doctrine and Covenants. So all of these young women in England who joined the church thinking that, okay, this is great. I am going to go to America. I'm going to find me a righteous priesthood holder, and we are going to live happily ever after. They come, they spend all their money, all their resources, they leave family, they sacrifice everything they have. They get to Salt Lake and they discover that the church had been lying to them the entire time, and they have no choice because they have no money, no resources to go back. What can they do but to be sucked into polygamy and live that lifestyle for the rest of their lives? And our apostles, our prophets, knew that they were doing that, knew that they were lying, and they went ahead and did it anyway. How disgusting is that? I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And then, I mean, John, I could go on. We're talking about the priesthood. And, you know, what I learned from Michael Quinn and others, including, who was the guy? Greg Prince. The development of the priesthood.
Do kind of a lightning round with priesthood, Book of Mormon, Book of Abraham. Not given the full explanation.
I'll do that really quick. The priesthood. There is ample evidence, you know, and I'm an FBI agent, a former FBI agent. I look for evidence, and I'm really serious about it. There is no evidence that Joseph ever had John the Baptist visit him, or Peter, James, and John. Nothing until 1834. We still today, our missionaries teach that we had the Melchizedek priesthood when the church was formed, because you had to have it before the church was organized in 1830. They say it was in 1829 that John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John appeared to Joseph and Oliver. There is absolutely no evidence that happened. There's no talk of any of that until 1834.
But there's anti-evidence because...
There's a lot of anti-evidence.
Because David Whitmer, who's one of the three witnesses, says the Melchizedek priesthood never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Never happened.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I didn't hear anything about that. William McClellan, also an apostle, said, I never heard anything about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to go on that.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one, the Book of Abraham. The Book of Abraham is not what Joseph said it was. I mean, we have the facsimiles in the Book of Mormon, and he says, you know, this picture in this facsimile means a certain thing. He describes everything in those facsimiles and gives us an explanation about that. None of that is correct. The Egyptian is all wrong. And so the argument that they now give, that the church now gives, Fair Mormon now gives, is that, well, there were scrolls that disappeared, and the Book of Abraham was on those scrolls. So I asked myself the question, if Joseph got everything wrong that we saw, what makes you think that he's going to get two other scrolls right? No way. And besides the fact that, you know, every Egyptian scholar, other than the two at BYU right now, just think it's just total ridiculousness. And the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon for me was the hardest one. I clung to that as long as I could until I studied the stuff that Brett Metcalf has given us. And a lot of the stuff that you've given, John, on, with Mike from Mormon Discussions. There's just so much about the Book of Mormon now that makes you realize it is it's a nice 18th century religious text.
19th century, sorry.
19th century religious text that Joseph gave us. You have to say, okay, there's a lot of stuff in the Book of Mormon that you can say are good religious scriptures. I mean, good religious stories. However, there's no archaeological evidence. The stuff that we have about language development, about the lack of anything Hebrew being found in North or Latin America during that time, everything points to the Book of Mormon not being historical. And there's a whole argument with that. And, when we talk about anachronisms, the church to say, okay, we have found 210 anachronisms, and now we found 150 of those anachronisms that were anachronisms at one time that we found are not anachronisms anymore. But you know what those anachronisms are? Arrows. They're just silly. You count all of these things, and wait a minute, to me, that's not really an anachronism. That is something you would expect to be here. But anyway, it's just, there's just so much. You look behind the curtain, you realize Oz is there, pulling the strings. There's just way too much disturbing literature there that made it so that I could not believe anymore.
Thanks for taking us through that. It was very articulate and thoughtful.
Well,
and most people don't have that level of command of the detail. And I just want, you've kind of alluded to this, but I want to really drive it home, because when you're trained to be an FBI agent, you're trained to what?
Oh, you're trained you got to have the details. You got to have them right.
And you got to have evidence.
You got to have evidence. And you can't, and it's got to be evidence that will stick. It can't be hearsay, It has to be good evidence. You've got to have good sources. And everything that I said just now, most all of it can be found in the Joseph Smith papers.
All of it. I want to say that until 5 years ago, I'd never seen Rod read an actual book, except for when we were in college. He's a guy who reads for information only. So he's really on top of the news and those kinds of things, but he's not somebody who reads for enjoyment. In the last 5 years, he has read hundreds of books. He has spent hundreds of hours listening to scholars report everything about the church. And he is like an FBI agent. When he gets his teeth sunk into a case, oh boy, he is not letting go until he has every single bit of evidence there's possible. I remember one time he had a case, and some of the other agents were saying, okay, Rod, you've got a good enough case. Let's take it to court and go from there. And he's like, no way. There is so much more to this, and I'm going to find out everything I can find until I've got all the evidence. Then we'll go to court, only then. And that's how I feel he's done with this. He wasn't, he didn't read the CES letter and say, okay, yeah, that's right, I don't believe anymore. Oh my gosh, the man could be hired as a church historian at this point, because he does remember the details. He could tell you every one of Joseph Smith's wives, how old they were when he married them, why they married him, how long he stayed. I mean, he could tell it all. There were times during the last 5 years when I would say, Rod, I need a break. We got to talk about something else. I can't, because he gets fired up every time he starts talking about it. And he would say, okay, all right, I'll give you a break. And then we'd go to bed, and it would be like midnight. And then he would do this, tap, tap. Can I just tell you one more thing? And I'd be like, sure, go for it. And then I would hear another half an hour. And that went on for a long time, and still is going on. It hasn't died down a lot. I know. Yeah. I didn't have to study as much as him. I read a few books. I read Rough Stone Rolling, a few of the other things, read the CES letter, some of the Joseph Smith stuff. But Rod has shared with me all the stuff he's read. Every day when he would come home, he would have those Leonard Arrington diaries dog-eared on almost every page. Let me tell you this. Now let me tell you this. Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch.
It was a brand new world, surprising and profoundly disappointing.
That's what he kept saying. I said, well, what do you think then? And he said, I have never been so profoundly disappointed in my life. And yeah, he did not want to know the things he knows.
Yeah. You recently put something out, John, where RFM is saying, I didn't want the church not to be true. I wanted it to be true, and he was a big defender of the church for a long time. And, all of us that have been defenders of the church and who have invested so much, all of their lives, the covenants I took in the temple to give all of my resources to the church, including my life, if it meant that. I was serious about that. And when you put that into that kind of effort into something, and then you realize that you have been deceived, it is so disheartening, so disappointing, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get over it. This, I came to that realization in 2021, and it's been less than a year and a half. Nan has only been out since like last May.
So Rod, you went first.
I was mentally first. I was still going to church. But mentally, I was checked. But
did you tell Nan I'm done, or did you keep that to yourself?
No, I just shared with her that stuff, but
the information,
but
the conclusion.
And it wasn't until I did in 2021. I finally, toward the end of 2021, I said, no, this is not the truth.
So Nan, as you're watching him learn all this stuff, and as you're supporting your kids, it took you a little bit longer. Do you want to share what your journey to reach a conclusion was like?
A big part of my journey was listening to Rod, and he was always very nice about it and explaining it, and some of my own reading. And, I started to have to say, maybe the origins of the church aren't what the church says they are. But does that mean that everything is now wrong? And does that mean I have to throw away everything? Because I believed, and frankly still do, that I had many, many spiritual experiences with God that I'm not willing to deny. And for a while, I thought I had to deny those in order to say I don't believe the church is true anymore. I've come to understand that that's not the case, that all of those experiences really did happen, whether or not it's with a God that looks like all the pictures in the Mormon chapels, whether or not, who exactly they were with and how they happened is a different story. But so I listen to Rod, and I respect his intelligence and his desire to only have accurate, provable evidence. And he would say to me, Nan, all this is in the Joseph Smith papers, all of it. It's not like I'm reading stuff from some random person that we don't know. This is in the Joseph Smith papers. And so I read some of that, and I started to see, after my son said that he felt like it was in the air in our home, this fact that as soon as one child breaks a commandment, then they know that our family isn't going to be in, happy heaven forever. I had started to look at that and say, maybe not everything the church teaches gives me what I thought it would, or what they say it will give you. And the idea of eternal families, instead of being this loving, benevolent document that's going to, or doctrine that's going to help us all be happy forever, instead, it's kind of fear-based, and that your decisions get made based on fear that you're going to cause the family to not be all together. And of course, somebody in the family, literally everyone in the family at some time or another, is going to do something that that they regret, and that's off what they should have done. And so I just started seeing that I'm not sure the church is bearing good fruit all the time. When Sally came out as gay, in the beginning, I just had to be present in the moment, and I just had to help Sally. And we helped Shane when he was just falling apart because of all of this. And we helped their kids. And then we got introduced to Lena and her kids, and we helped them. And that was what I spent my efforts on. But then as time went on and Sally and Lena were settled, I could really give my attention to the things Rod was telling me. And I could spend time thinking about, what is Sally supposed to do? What should be? I have 13 grandkids. What if one of them chooses this when they're young? Not chooses it, declares it, realizes it, that they're gay when they're young. Do I just tell a 10-year-old, well, you're out then? You've either got to be alone forever and ever, which we all know is not what God put us here on earth to be, or you're going to leave the church and break all the commandments and be sent to outer darkness. So I started to see the more ways that I was having to defend the church that I knew were indefensible. Like I was defending it to my kids who had left, and to to Rod when he would tell me something at night, and I'd say, yeah, but if we just have faith, then this and this and this. And I was spending so much time defending the church, defending President Nelson, and he's a good guy, and he's just trying to help us. And then I would learn something else about President Nelson and how he exaggerated one of his stories in his talks to become pretty much an outright lie that's provable, and a few other things. And I started to say, well, if the beginnings of the church aren't true, and Joseph Smith wasn't who I always thought he was, and all of that church history, which is pretty much today, we're built on all that. If the foundation is cracked in 1,000 pieces, and right now it's not providing what our current members need, whether they're LGBTQ, whether they're single women. Not that long ago, one of the leaders said in conference, more than 50% of the membership of the church is single. Have you ever heard a lesson on how to be happy, being single? Ever once? Have you ever had a lesson on how you can lead a fulfilling, good, happy life and be with all your loved ones in heaven forever if you're single? I haven't ever heard one. All of the lessons I attend, whether it's gospel doctrine or Relief Society or general conference or anything else, are all about we need a man and a woman and children to be together, and then everybody can go to heaven. So if the church is aware that more than 50% of their membership is single, and yet they're not addressing that and saying, we're going to have every other lesson be about that, and how to be a single mom, whether you live in the Philippines or in Utah or wherever else. And I just saw that they were, I don't like to use the word out of touch, because I think they know darn well the statistics of our church and how many are LGBTQ, how many are single, but they just weren't willing to do the hard thing and make some changes that would help the people in the church. So it finally got to a point where I recognized that I had been believing in a church that didn't exist. Like I believed Sally was going to be with us in heaven anyway. And my kids who had left the church were going to be with us in heaven anyway. And I believed that Heavenly Father loved LGBTQ people that were married or having sex or whatever, that he loved them just the same and that they were going to be in heaven forever. And I I believed that just so many things, and I started to recognize that is not what the church teaches. That is not reality, Nan. You've concocted this religion that you're so loyal to that's not even it's not true. It's not a thing. The real church, the Mormon church that you show up for every Sunday does not believe those last 10 things that you said you believe, and don't teach that, and will actually, excommunicate you for that. So why are you holding all this loyalty even though you don't believe this whole chunk of stuff that the church teaches? And I finally had to say, I guess I don't. And that was hard, really hard to do. One of my biggest hurdles towards the very end was my dad. And he told me probably 4 times that I can remember, and once just 2 weeks just before he died, a little bit of time right before he died, he said, we've built this family on a rock, and I'm handing you the torch as the oldest kid to keep everybody on this rock, on this solid foundation. And our pioneers did it for us, and now I'm giving it to you, and I want you to do it for me and keep this family going. That was hard to let go of after, because I still believe he's one of the greatest people ever. That kept me for a while, just that, not wanting to disappoint him. But when I finally came to terms, in fact, my brother and I had a conversation about it. He had left the church some time before, and he said, I feel the same way, Nan. It was a big stumbling block for me, Dad was. But I had to come to terms and believe that he's one of those people in heaven, and he knows everything now, and he knows the truth. And the last thing he's going to be is disappointed in you. So I was finally able to get over that and finally kind of settle into, okay, I don't believe. And it was really, really hard. And a lot of that happened, most of that happened during the filming of the documentary. So do you want us to talk a little bit about the documentary? Yeah. So we were driving to Sally's house to visit them for Ozzy's birthday, and Sally called us on the phone and said, I haven't told you yet, but we've been talking with these producers in New York that think they might want to do a little piece about our family on like maybe ABC News or 2020 as one of the 20-minute segments. And they're going to come and film. And we said, oh, that's cool. And they said, they're coming this weekend while you guys are here, and you'll get filmed. And we like, what? All right, do we want to do this? Are you sure? What's the purpose of it? She's like, they just saw a picture of our family with our cute 7 kids all dressed in rainbows online and called us and said, we want to do a little project with you guys. So Rod and I went down to Ozzy's birthday, and there was the film crew, and we were there 4 days, and the film crew was there the entire time with a producer from New York, and they filmed us all. They filmed the soccer games. They filmed the birthday party. They filmed us having a picnic at the park, all the things. And then at the end, they said, oh, Rod and Nan, we want to film you guys just on your own. So they took us to a house they had rented and got all the lights set up, and the film crew was there, and it was just Rod and I, and they got this close to us, and they said, okay, tell us how you feel about Sally being gay. Tell us, how does it feel to pay tithing to a church that says Sally can't go to heaven? How does it feel to give so much to the church? Because Rod and I still had leadership callings at church, and we were giving all we had, and how do you feel? How do you mesh those two things together? And of course, they would ask Rod a question like that, and Rod would answer like an FBI agent, knowing that everything he says can and will be used against him. And so he was articulate and composed and all of that. And then I
was careful.
Yeah, you were careful.
I didn't want to come out on film.
and say anything. So then they would ask me, and I would say, well, I love Sally. She's my best, daughter, and she's so great. But the church means everything to me, and I believe it with all my heart, and I'm never going to leave. So, I'm just trying to work the two together somehow, and I support Sally, and here are the ways that I've tried to support her, but this and this. And then they would have another question, and I would start crying, and then they'd ask me more and more and more, and pretty soon I'd been on camera for twice as long as Rod, because that's the stuff that's going to be more fun to watch on a documentary than the carefully worded FBI agent's response. And after they filmed us, they put together a little 15-minute sizzle reel of the whole weekend and showed it to the decision makers in New York. And they watched it all and said, yes, we definitely want to move forward with this project and do it. But this whole Mormon parent angle, what's that about? That's just not like, oh, yeah, the mom and dad are conservative, and so they're not sure about this gay thing. This is a whole other thing, and we need to look into that. So what started out as a short little piece turned into an entire year of filming. Sally and Lena had GoPro cameras all over their house. They had them in their cars, and they were filmed for an entire year. And Rod and I were filmed intermittently for an entire year. So they came to our house 2 different times and stayed 3 or 4 days and asked us to invite our Mormon friends over and have a dinner party, and filmed it all for hours on end, and then decided not to use that part in the film, in the documentary.
That always happens.
Yeah.
But they asked us so many questions. They had FaceTime calls with us when Elder Holland gave his musket fire talk, when Brad Wilcox gave his talk, both of which were extremely upsetting to me. So upsetting. I was right at the place where I was cracked, and I didn't know which way to go, and I was trying to hang on. And those 2 talks just did me in. And they filmed my response to that and talking to them about that for, an hour. So in a year's worth of filming, they had our faith journey, especially mine, on film. And oh, how I wish I could have all that film, because 90% of it didn't make it into the documentary. But, they'd ask me again 3 months later, how do you feel about this church and your tithing money, or now your youngest son has left the church, so how do you feel? You've got all these kids out of the church. You're going to be in heaven all by yourself. And I would start crying again and say, I don't know how to make this fit. I don't know. I'm trying. And I would go to bed at night, first worried about what I said on camera and were they going to use it, because I don't even remember what I said. And second, thinking about what I said and how I kind of like heard my own voice every night. Oh, yeah, you said this and this and this. And you really are having so much cognitive dissonance about this subject, about this doctrine, about this practice. And I recognized that I was questioning, and that my solid belief that I had had for 60 years was crumbling. And I didn't want it to crumble. And so the next time I got on camera, I would say, I am not leaving. I don't care if I'm the last person in this whole family standing. I will stand on that solid rock by myself. It's fine with me. Let the rain come. And then they would interview me for 6 hours. And by the end, I'd be crying, thinking, why is my grip so tight that I can't see the truth? I was holding on. I had white knuckles, holding on to the loyalty to the church, the loyalty to my dad, the loyalty to all my experiences that brought me faith and joy. And when I finally started loosening my grip, even just a little, it was such an unfamiliar feeling that it would take me a while to recover from a whole day of filming, or from 4 days of when they were at our house filming us. And I really have to say that that documentary, speaking out loud my feelings, knowing they were being documented forever and maybe going to be on TV for everyone to see, really helped me see myself. Like, it was a powerful way to literally hear my own voice say what I was starting to believe and starting to not believe. And I don't know if I hadn't been part of that documentary, if I would be where I am right now. Probably not. But because they asked me all the hard questions, boy, that producer and all her team were studying Mormonism every night. They were reading the Book of Mormon. They were reading the policies. They were listening to you. They were doing all the things so that they could have more questions for us the next day. And they would come with hard questions, and I would say, well, I don't really believe that Sally isn't going to be with us in the next life because, I mean, it's totally evident she's the greatest person, the same as she was the day before she told us she was gay. So that just can't be. And same with my boys. And it just solidified in my own mind that I was believing in a church that didn't exist, that the way the church is set up right now is doing more harm than good in the world, which was a really big thing for me to accept. And I finally had to say, and so on the day Sally was getting married, the big-time producer from New York flew in just for the wedding day. So she was assigned to me to talk to me in all the wedding prep on the morning of the wedding. And now that I look back on it, I don't think that's coincidence. But she came in my room and talked to me about how I was feeling about this. And 3 months earlier, I was shopping for a wedding dress with my sister in San Francisco. My sister had been out of the church for a while. She's the most fun person to go shopping with, and she convinced me to buy this dress that didn't have sleeves. And I said, there is no way I wouldn't even try it on. And she said, come on, at least try it on. Then we'll know if this brand fits or not, And in the end, I ended up buying it thinking, this will make my sister happy. I'll put it in the closet, but I'll find something else with sleeves because I'm not going to make some announcement at the wedding and show up without sleeves. But the longer that dress hung in my closet, every time I opened my closet to get ready in the morning, there was that dress. And I started to see that is the direction you're going, Nan. That is the future you. So why are you so hesitant to be that now? That is where you're headed and what you've decided in your head. And so I quit thinking about getting a different dress. And that dress had 3 months to give me some more confidence. So the day of the wedding, that producer was in talking to me, and I got out the dress and showed it to her. And she said, put it on. Let's see what your husband and your family thinks. So I put the dress on, which they showed in the documentary, and I came out, and there's Rod and my son Sam, and they're like, whoa, Sam says, I haven't seen your shoulders in so long, and they all commented like, wow, Mom, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yes, I am. And I told the producer, I think I'm out. I think I'm going to leave, like all the way leave, not just like not show up on Sunday, but I think that I'm done with the church. And it's a scary thing, but I think I am. And we went to the wedding, and I wore the dress. And when I saw it on the documentary, it was hilarious because to anyone who's not a Mormon, they would go, what? Like, it wasn't some sexy, strapless cocktail dress. It was a very modest dress that stopped right here at the shoulders. And, it was all of 1.5 inches different than what I'd been wearing my whole life. But to everyone who watched that documentary who is Mormon, they knew exactly what I was feeling. And that 1.5 inches says everything about you.
Very loudly.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
it is an announcement.
It is an announcement. And I wore it, and I was happy I wore it. And that night, I said to Rod, I said on film when the producer was in with me that I'm out of the church all the way. I said, I don't know if they're going to put that on the documentary. And Rod's like, who are we kidding? That is going to go on the documentary. And I said, that's scary that I would say that, and that all the world and all the people I've known and all the people I love and that I've worked with in the church for 60 years are going to hear that. And he's just like, Nan, you and I both know we cannot believe in this anymore. And so I let go of it mentally and just said, let it be, whatever. And the truth is, from there on, there's been no looking back. Mm-hmm. None. I don't second guess myself. I don't second guess Rod. I don't think, well, did I make the right decision? Should I go? Not even this much. I am 100% confident in my decision to believe that I don't know anything anymore. And it was really hard to let go of the certainty that the church provides. Yeah. Raising my kids, it was so nice that I was certain about everything. This is what's going to happen to us after we die. This is how you stay on the straight and narrow. Here's what you need to do to get there. And suddenly, I don't have any certainty. I don't know anything. That's a big, big change. But I tell you, somehow, I told that to a friend recently who's in the church, and she said, can you tell me more about that, Nan? And I said, it's one of the few things in my life that I don't think you can know until you've experienced it. I don't think any amount of me telling you, a believing member, of how I came to be where I am now, that it would change anything about you, that you would then be open to hearing more. It really has to be lived to be believed that I can really be so calm about this decision. And also all the stuff we talked about earlier about our marriage and me learning how to voice my opinions and then having cancer and having to not keep all my needs stuffed in. I think that had to happen before I could leave the church, because I started to have to take ownership of myself, make my own decisions, not just ask God what I should do all the time or my church leaders, and take ownership of my own decisions and what I needed out of life. So that had happened, and then I came to this, and I could let go finally. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't done that first piece, I never would have been able to do this piece. So yeah. I feel like it was all meant to be. The universe is conspiring in my favor. That's how I like to look at it now. And I really believe they are. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Both of you. Thank you for sharing kind of the deconstruction journey, I think, of things. I know it's kind of, a newer world, but could we talk just for a few minutes about rebuilding and what that's looked like recently for you both? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, you kind of shared, I feel like intuitively, just naturally a minute ago, some of the rebuilding victories, some of the things that have been really beautiful about your rebuilding process. This could be alone or together, either one. But do things come to mind in particular that you feel like, wow, here's where the beauty's been in rebuilding so far?
Mm-hmm. Can I talk for just a minute?
Sure.
And then we'll give it to you. Rod and I, a couple of years earlier, had thought about where we wanted to retire. And since we've moved so many places, we don't have a place that's just home. And so we were debating where to retire. And we thought about all the places in the West, because we have 2 kids that are permanently in Southern California. And we came for a lot of different reasons. to the decision that Utah would be the best. So we bought an acre lot in Mapleton and said, when we retire, whether that's in 2 or 3 or 4 years, we'll build a house there. Then when those 2 years went past and we really were ready to retire and to move, by then we had said goodbye to the church, and we said, well, I don't know if we should move there. It's probably not a good place for us, and maybe we should just sell that lot. And our son Sam said, Mom, wherever there's a lot of Mormons, there's a lot of post-Mormons. And if you move somewhere else, you're going to make plenty of friends because you're good at making friends, but they won't have any idea what you're going through as you've just left the church and all the deconstruction and why you don't know what alcohol is what and why you've never ordered a cup of coffee in your life. You need to be where there's post-Mormons that you can relate to and be friends with and get through this next phase of deconstruction. So we said, okay, we'll go to Utah, we'll see how it feels, and then we'll decide. So we got here, and I said, I'm going to need to be brave because we don't have anybody here. Our youngest son, Joe, still lives here, but he and his girlfriend are taking off at the end of summer to go move to Southern Cal. So we're not here for our kids and grandkids. We're not here for, any other reason. Are we going to be able to do this? And I said to myself and wrote in my journal, all right, you need to plan out what your steps are going to be to make friends because you got to have some friends here. Otherwise, it's just going to be you and Rod sitting in a house lonely forever. And that's not going to work.
Until you die.
Yeah, until we die. A lone couple in the dreary world, So we'd only been here a couple weeks. I looked online for a meetup. We marched down to a coffee shop in Provo on a Sunday morning, nervous. And what do you know? Everybody was so nice and kind and asked about our story. And we said, we're kind of on the down low, except for that there's going to be this documentary about us we think is coming out soon. And they're like, what? So a couple women at that meetup said, oh, there's this group called WACA, which stands for Women of a Certain Age.
Really quick, the first group, was that the Utah Valley Post-Mormon Community, UVPM, a support group
I think
tied to
so.
them?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll list that first.
Okay.
Utah Valley Post-Mormon.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
And then you learned about WACA.
Yeah, and then I learned about WACA, which was women over the age of 40 who were post-Mormon, who wanted to be friends and have a fulfilling life and rebuild a community that you probably lost after the church. So I went to this event 2 days later with these two women that I didn't even know their names. And the WACA event, there were 25 women. We were at a swimming pool. It was so much fun. They were all really nice. I told them a little about the documentary and that I thought it was coming out within a couple months. And they were all interested in that. And one of them invited me to go out to dinner with her husband and me and Rod. And we went out and they were great. And ready, set, go. And we are friends with that couple. We are friends with all those people who were at that swimming party and their spouses. That was last probably July, and our social calendar is full, which makes me really happy. I am thriving, and it is.
And I'm tired.
Yeah, Rod doesn't need as much social interaction as I do, but he's very willing to come along, and he enjoys it all the time. And especially now with his focus on church history, a lot of the other couples that we get together with have a similar interest and know a lot about church history. So instead of Rod being the one that doesn't talk quite as much when we go out with friends, I'm having to rescue people from Rod,
Yeah, we just got a sense for how animated Rod is about church history.
And I'm like, you don't have to stay and listen anymore. And they're like, oh no, we love it. We're just going to go read that book he told us about. So we have made so many friends. And this new term, trauma bonding, which I didn't know anything about before, is probably a little bit of what's happening. Like we all feel. Here's a statement that I'll make. I have yet to meet one single person that wanted to leave the church. Not one. Not anybody who was all in, not anybody who was half in, not anyone who left when they were 41 or 61. Everyone would have chosen to study and find out that the church is true. And that can definitely be said about Rod and I. We did not want the church to not be true. We did not want to leave with all our hearts. And yet, here we are. So all these people that we've met are in a similar situation, and some of them have been out quite a while, and they're mentors to us on how it's going to feel. One person told us about the group called Thrive. We went to a Thrive meeting, which in Utah County, it looks different in all cities across the country, but in Utah County, because there are so many post-Mormons, there's a group that meets the first Wednesday of every month. We have a leader who we all sit around in a big circle, and it's kind of like an AA meeting where everybody goes around and tells where they are on their faith journey, whether they're just questioning, whether they're out, how long, whatever. And the first time we went, we, of course, were nervous. We didn't know anybody there. And what do you know? Just like the other stuff, we left with 25 new friends. Everybody there was so welcoming and kind and all in need of help themselves. And they were all helping each other. And it was the first time we found people our age or even older who were just newly leaving the church, which that was really good for me because most of the people we know who've left are our kids' ages. And it was so good to see other people there who were just in the same spot we were, and they were our age. There were even two couples that were older than us at that first Thrive meeting. And we were blown away. We're like, we're not the only ones who at this age are figuring this out. That was really helpful. So from that, we never miss a Thrive meeting. We go every month. It's been a lifeline for us. It's a place where you can share. One month I'll go and I'm so sad and I have all this sadness about how strict I was with my kids and how I didn't teach them that they could be independent of me and choose their own way, and I'll cry and it'll be sad, and everyone puts their arm around me and says, we know how this feels, we felt the same way. And then one month I'll go and I'll be angry because I talked to an old friend who said, no, I'm not going to watch your documentary, so don't ask me to. And then I'm just angry about all the people with closed minds, and then all the Thrive friends will say, it's normal to feel angry, and you're going to have ups and downs, and it's going to be sad and then mad and then scary and then delightful and happy and all of that. So Thrive has really been good for us. And after we'd been going several months, we said, hey, what can we do to help? And now we've started helping out with some of the Thrive events that take place when we have a separate event from those monthly meetings. So that's been really good. But I will say out of all those things I just listed, the best one is Rod, that he now, we go out with friends and he has plenty to say and he wants to talk and he's engaged in all of it. And I don't have to say, Rod, come on, I need more friends. Will you please just go out to dinner with me and this new friend I made? Now he's like, yeah, I want to go out. And that guy right there, he knows a lot about church history. Let's go out with them. And it's been really fun, and that's been a really great addition to our life.
Beautiful.
Okay, Rod, what have you got
We're
to
ready
add to
for
all
you,
that?
Rod.
She just said it all. At the end. Well, she's explained pretty much what we've done since leaving. It hasn't been that long, but we've met a lot of great people, and we're thankful for that. Pardon me. For me, it's still kind of hard in that, when you leave the church, you leave your community and you leave your, for me, it's a lot of sense of purpose, and especially that I'm retired now and, I don't have, going to work to look forward to and keeping my mind occupied with, the chase that I was so used to. So it is. I'm still working on finding, now what I want to do with the rest of my life. Even though I'm the age that I am.
We thought we'd be on a mission, maybe another mission and another mission.
But I wouldn't have it any other way. I joined the church because it was true. I didn't join the church, for any other reason. And because I thought it was the way, the truth, and the life. And, finding that that's not the case kind of put me in a tailspin. And I'm trying to find purpose. And I think, if you grab onto Nan's coattails, she'll take you to a lot of good places. And so I've grabbed onto her coattails and, helping her when she's helping, with her endless energy, she's helping a lot. And, I can tag along and do about 1/10 of what she does, or maybe a 100th of what she does, and feel satisfied and feel like I'm contributing. Mm-hmm. So that's where I am.
Tell them about Encircle.
Yeah, we volunteer at Encircle once a week, and we help host a get together with parents that might be struggling with an issue on the LGBTQ in that arena. And that's something that we do. But and I'm happy. We've met a lot of great people, through that organization, and we are really thankful for that organization. It does a lot of good. So we're finding more things to do. We feel like we have a community. Yeah. We're at a better place than we thought we'd be.
Yes.
Having left the church. So we're really grateful.
Yeah. I do think rebuilding goes on and on, doesn't it? It's not something you do and then it's just neat and tidy and you leave it.
No.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. But I am hearing service, a place to, you're finding kind of ways to serve community, right?
And
friends.
That's really important to me. I think I don't feel like I don't have a purpose in the same way Rod does, because we moved, I can't remember if I mentioned on here, but we've lived in 10 different states and 3 times overseas. And I'm the mom at home with the kids moving to a new city, and Dad goes off to work. And then I got to figure out, how am I going to create a life for our family in this new place? And then I get to work. And most of it's through the church, but I also find, how we're going to fit in the church and the community and the school and all that. And so I have done that before, where Rod's always had, wherever we move, he just goes to work in the morning and he's got all that. So this is totally new for Rod to retire and then come here and not have either the church or his job to put structure into his days or purpose into his life. And so we're figuring that out together, and I've had more experience at it because we've moved. And so I'm saying, hey, Rod, I found this good place. We can volunteer. How about coming with me to the soup kitchen? And how about we do this? And we're figuring it out. We recognize that we are very privileged. Leaving the church when your kids have left already is...
Yeah, we've had it easy.
Yeah, we've had it easy that way.
Yeah.
We don't have any family. My 2 siblings left years ago. My parents have passed on. And so we didn't have any of the worries about how we're going to navigate family relationships. That's not an issue for us. So we feel privileged in that we don't have a lot of those things to worry about. And so we can spend our energy saying, how are we going to help the next guy? How are we going to help the future people who leave the church? What can we offer them?
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. And our work at Encircle has been really rewarding, and we love being there every week with those kids and those people.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate, Rod, you bringing up that overlay of kind of how experiencing a faith journey with retirement, in particular, how that might change the experience a little bit from, let's say, if it's happening in your 20s or your 30s. I think that's really important to note, and has a lot. I can imagine and can see and envision the impact of that being quite different. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. It's it's a new challenge for me.
Yeah, understandably. And that brings me to my other question. So in talking about this idea of like what's been some of the best things about rebuilding, what have been some of the harder? And you kind of led, I think, a little bit already with that. But anything else you want to share with regard to what's been difficult, challenging, any grief or loss? I think we were talking a little bit earlier with parenting kind of coming in here, of some of that coming in with what can be kind of hard about it.
Okay.
How do you want to talk about how we feel about how we raise the kids and what we, okay, I'll talk about it. But I do feel sad that I was so clear in my message to them that there is only one way to be happy. And I wish I could have known to say, we love you. This is what works for us. This is what we hope you'll do while you're here with us. But you get to choose what you want to do with your life and how you want to live when it comes to church and everything else. I wish, as they were young, that I hadn't put into the air of our home what Joe was talking about when he said, it was in the air I breathed growing up that my brothers were making decisions that might make us have empty seats in heaven. I so badly wish I could go back and change that narrative and say, there's nothing you can do that will change how we feel about you, and that not only that there's nothing you can do that will make us respect you less, So I do have a lot of sadness about how orthodox we were with the kids growing up. Our kids have been very kind to us and say, we know you're sad about that. We know you're sorry. I told one of my kids, if I had a time machine, I would go back and do it over. One of them was telling me, you did this and this and this and this, and these are the ways that has caused me pain as an adult. And that was really hard to hear. And I said, if I had a time machine, I would go back and do it so differently. I promise I would, but I don't have one. So I'm sorry you have had these difficulties as an adult and that you might continue to, but I can't do anything else other than just say how sorry I am. And that's all I can do. But our kids have been really nice and said, we know and we understand that, now that you know differently, you can do it differently. So, for me, there's been the good that has happened since I've left, and the new things I've learned, and then the new ways of thinking about the world, and all of that so far outweighs any hard things of leaving. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the case for you.
Well, probably the hardest thing for me is that it's hard for me to be a BYU sports fan now.
This is valid.
It's hard, but I think I can still do it because I do have a season ticket to football. I love sports, and no, I love the athletes, and they're out there just like anybody else, you know. So I respect them. I respect the coaches. I respect those kids that are playing. But I'm finding myself becoming more of a Utah fan. So that's something that is something that I didn't think would happen. So that's probably the most important thing. So I got
Sports,
that out.
what else is there?
I got that out of the way. Yeah.
And you've worked through it, it sounds
I've
like.
worked.
That hard thing
I'm
you've-
still working through it. No, but seriously though,
there are the Aggies. You did get an MBA. From
you know
Utah.
I do. I have Utah State, but and when they're playing, I cheer for them. And Weber State, I went to Weber. Yeah,
It's going to be hard not to cheer for somebody else other than BYU when you're sitting in the middle of BYU season ticket holder people.
and no, I want them to do well, and it's sometimes a little triggering to be there. You know, it's a little triggering to be amidst all of that, but.
For sure.
Probably the one of the hard things is dealing with friends that are still in, and I think Nan's had a harder. Nan's had some experiences that are, it's tricky sometimes. You never want to show disrespect to your friends. We still love all of our active Mormon friends. None of that has changed. Our personal feelings about them as the great people that they are. We still honor them and hold them in high esteem. I never want to make someone that is a member of the church feel like we think they are less than us because we left. We have a good friend who recently, I said, hey, we were talking, and I had a reason to say, I love my Mormon friends, and everyone is on their own journey. We were, 3 years ago, we were as in as anybody, and that can change. And we didn't want anybody at that time to judge us and look down upon us, because of what we believed at that time. And in our hearts, we believed, and we were trying to do the right thing. And we really believed we were doing the right thing. So, I said, I think I'd be a hypocrite if I criticized you for staying in the church when I didn't want anybody to criticize me when I was in the church. And I get that.
And she said,
what's that?
And then what did she say?
She said, thank you for saying that. I thought you guys thought I was stupid. And wow, we don't want to make anybody feel that way. We just do not. And I hope they don't. But I think it's, I think it happens. And I think we have to make an effort to try to make people feel like they're not. I remember, when we were TBMs, 100% in, it's not easy to deal with somebody that has left the church, and they have their reasons for leaving the church, and you think they have some resentment toward you as a member of the church, right? That's what I thought when I was a member. It's hard, even though you don't want to think about that, you don't want to think that they have resentment, it still affects how you relate to them personally. And we have to work so that our friends who are still in the church don't feel like we have animosity or resentment toward them. I think the responsibility is on us to do that, and that's a hard thing. We have people that we know and love that don't want to watch the documentary. They won't watch Mormon No More because it says Mormon No More. They think, okay, this is going to criticize our church. It's going to criticize the thing that's most important to me in the whole world. So therefore, I've been taught not to watch stuff like that, and I'm not going to do it. You know, they don't realize that documentary is just a story of our family, you know, and it would be fun for them to watch it. But that's okay, you know, and we don't want them to feel like we look down upon them because they didn't.
When my brother and sister left the church together, it's been quite a few years ago, I felt like they viewed me as naive, as unwilling to really look and study the church. I had in my mind, you guys think you're evolved and that you're so enlightened and that you look at me like I am just somebody who's blindly following along. And they never said anything to me that was unkind, ever. That was just what my perception was of them and what I thought they were thinking of me. But when I look at that now and how I behaved when they left, I didn't say, please tell me more. Why are you leaving? Tell me the reasons. I want to hear what you've been studying. I didn't say that. It was uncomfortable. It was, I didn't want to know all those things because I knew the church was true, so I don't need to hear all this talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to say one little thing. When we moved here, one of our friends showed us their new house, and in the basement, they have a huge room specifically for food storage. And it has got enough food storage in there to save all the people in Provo. And it was just amazing. They have water. They have manuals of telling you what you should eat first and how to make sure the water's still clean and how much each person's going to need to drink. And they've been
prepper stuff.
They are preppers.
And they have been to church classes, and the manuals are all put out by the church on how to save yourself when there's a terrible earthquake or an apocalypse or whatever. And when we left their house, I said to Rod, they have this couple we know has a lot of grandkids, so many, I don't know how many. And I said, do you think there's more chance of one of their grandkids leaving the church or one of their kids coming out as gay
Jesus returning.
or than Jesus returning or an earthquake where they're going to need to use all that? And I said, the church has spent so much time and energy over the last 30 years telling us to be prepared for when Jesus comes again or when there's an earthquake or a flood or whatever. And we have all the food storage and we know what we're doing to save us. And now even these people had a whole room for it. I said, show me a house with a room that says, this room is for difficult conversations. This room is a room where you can talk to your kids when they break your heart. Why doesn't the church have classes on that? Because the members are far more likely to experience that than any earthquake.
Or when a kid comes out as gay.
Exactly.
Or loses their faith.
Any difficult conversation. At church, we don't talk about our hard things. We that's not a place where you can bring up, oh, I'm having a hard time in my marriage. Or, oh, this isn't going well and my kids are doing this. You don't talk about that. It's a place where everybody tries to look as perfect as they can. And I feel like, why don't we all have stacks of manuals on one that says how to talk to your kid when they come out of the closet? How do you talk to your kids when they leave the church? Yes?
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
It's because you have a member of the First Presidency in General Conference saying that it is our responsibility as a church to oppose any effort to blur what is a traditional family or homogenize gender.
Yeah.
Oppose. It is our responsibility to oppose gay people, or transgender people, or non-binary people, or any other non-heterosexual relationships, or gender orientation.
Yeah.
That's why, is because the membership gets that message from the top.
Well, when we finally build our house, I'm going to put a sign on one of the rooms that says, "This is the room for difficult conversation."
Okay.
Because I believe that the quality of your life is largely dependent on the number of difficult conversations you are willing to have.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that before. I didn't have a difficult conversation in my marriage or with raising kids for 30 years. I just kept it in. And wow, coming to the recognition that having difficult or awkward conversations about difficult things is what leads you to a better life. I'm so happy to know that now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I have one final question for you.
That was beautiful, by the way.
It was beautiful.
Super
When
powerful.
Thanks.
Super powerful.
All about it.
Thank you.
Is with your marriage. So if we were going to talk about kind of earlier, when we were in your earlier years, and this idea of, I mean, if you connect to the visual of burning down a marriage and building a new one, how would you describe now your partnership and what some of the components in your rebuild are?
Okay.
Not like putting them on the spot, Margie.
No,
That's
that's
good.
okay. Rod, I want you to talk about that. And how did we burn down the old one, and what are we doing for the new one?
And that can be
I would
activities
think-
you do together.
I
It
think,
can be,
I think, it was, Nan's having this inner turmoil that I didn't know existed, at least to the degree that it was making her ill, and it was making her really suffer. I didn't know that. When she decided, okay, I am going to do something about this, it was like a giant surprise to me. I don't think unfortunately, I don't think I'm unique. I think this happens a lot, particularly in a high demand religion kind of experience where the husband is supposed to be the grand poobah of everything and the woman is supposed to follow. When she finally decided that she needed to talk, that was difficult for me to wrap my teeth around. Wrap what? Am I going to wrap my teeth around anything? I don't think so. But to wrap my head around, I thought everything was fine, and obviously she didn't. So it was difficult for me to adjust to her saying everything isn't fine, and then working through all of that. And we've done it for years now.
And how has our journey out of the church affected that?
I think things are better now. I think I think it's easier to communicate because we can really talk about real feelings. Without the filter of, okay, I can't say that because it would look like I'm not faithful. I can't say something because the rules say that a woman is supposed to be respectful to her husband and shouldn't say things like that. And like for me, I am really thankful that we can now be more honest with each other without a cloud over our heads of judgment. I think we both judged each other, through the lens of the church. I think we would both probably take advantage if we could find a fault, and we could use that in a way that we could weaponize that, we would do it. That's not healthy at all. And I think we're a lot less likely to do that now. That we're out and I think talking about leaving the church and the issues that we had in leaving, I think particularly Sally coming out caused us to have to talk about hard things, and that's been healthy for us. And I think we talk better now about hard things than we did before.
I feel like, just like cancer forced me to express some of my needs because I physically couldn't take care of myself, and it forced me to reevaluate my worth. Leaving the church and taking away the certainty of life. Before, doesn't matter what question you asked me, I could have answered it with certainty, and it would have been straight out of the church handbook. Now, I don't even know if there is an afterlife, let alone what it's going to look like. So instead of suffering as a good martyr would do and saying, in the next life, our marriage will be great because in heaven, everybody's going to be perfect and great. I don't do that anymore. If I'm having a hard time, I say, hey, Rod, we need to work this out because I don't know if I've even got a next life. And so now I see the value in taking care of myself now, not in everything I do is for the future. Teaching my kids so that they will go on missions, so that they will go on and have families that stay in the church. Everything was about future, future, future. Now, that's been taken away. So now I don't do anything for what's going to happen in the next life. I do it for, is this going to make us happier now? Is this going to be for the good of the world or for us? And it's surprisingly feels so good. Surprising. I am so surprised with how good I feel. I thought it wasn't going to go this way. And I am so happy, and I'm finding the joy in taking ownership. And not, before I would tell you, oh, faith is everything, and my faith is what brings me joy. Now I'm like, I can handle this. I'll answer that question for myself. I don't need to pray and go to the handbook and go to the bishop or whatever I used to do. Now I can say, this is what I think is best, and let's try that. Yeah. So yep. I think Rod didn't know that our marriage was rough for a long time, and now maybe you don't recognize how much it's changed and how good it is and how things are better. And I do. And I'm really happy. Really happy.
I do. I recognize it's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I did notice too, just in talking with you, is companionship. It does feel like in those early years where you were split parallel doing that thing, that when I see you and when you describe your life or what you're up to, that there is a lot of, whether that's skiing or whether that's, socializing and being with friends, that there's a shared life for sure now.
Yeah. Very
I think
much.
we're much more emotionally connected because we understand that's important and we work at it. Nan and I have always done stuff together. I mean, we've run 11 marathons together, and we trained for all those over the years. We would.
It's a lot of marathons, people.
And we started a long time ago, and we run one every couple years probably. And, we did a lot of stuff together. We were, that's why it was so hard for me to say, what, you're not happy? Because we do a whole lot of stuff together.
Yeah.
But yeah. But here we are,
Perfect.
and we love each other, and we try harder, and things are good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Nan and Rod, what a powerful, entertaining, and epic, healing, informative Mormon story.
Thanks.
Thanks so much
Thanks,
for
John.
sharing.
It's been great to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hope somebody else out there listening who's worried about the ramifications of leaving or what they're going to do and all that can get another experience of hope from us that says it's going to be okay.
There is happy life
Yeah.
after you leave the church.
Yeah.
And I'll just plug a few resources that were mentioned and maybe a few that weren't. I can tell from the way Sal and maybe your son reached out to you that they watched some of the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis podcast and resources. That whole canoe, lifeboat, you know, that's from
awesome.
the retreats and things Margie and I and Natasha did. So check out Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis at mormonfaithcrisis.com if you need support in navigating your journey. Of course, CES Letter is a really good resource for learning about the church, along with the LDS discussion series that we've done on Mormon Stories and many other good resources. I want to make sure people know about the Utah Valley Post-Mormon community. Check that out. WACA, Women of a Certain Age. If you're 40 or above, particularly, that's a fantastic community to receive support. Check out Thrive at thrivebeyondreligion.com. There'll be upcoming events and even local communities that you can join and support groups, or you can start one if you want. There's 4 or 5 Thrive activities planned just for this year alone, and many more to come, including a cruise, including Thrive for.
Yeah. Can I talk about the
please.
women's conference coming?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Thrive for Women.
Yeah. So I'm on the planning committee. It's a women's conference for Thrive women, any age women, and you don't have to be out of the church to come. You can be anywhere in there and come. It's going to be at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. It's on June 2nd and 3rd, which is a Friday, Saturday. It's a 2-day event. So if you want to, come to it, you get 2 whole days out of it. You can fly in and stay. We have 10 speakers coming that are going to present. We have Anthony Miller, Natasha Helfer, Samantha from Zelf on the Shelf. We have Gabby Accord, who is a therapist. We have 2 or 3 therapists. We have a music therapist, a meditation person that's going to help us learn about that when we get uptight. We have good food planned. It's a 2-day, all-day event, and it is going to be great. So if you go on the Thrive community page, you will see that you can buy tickets for that now. It's just going to be really awesome.
All right, and that's thrivebeyondreligion.com.
Yes.
Also, there's for post-Mormon women in their 20s and 30s, there's a group called Faith Journey Meetups. That's the name of the Facebook group. But then there's the Lost and Found Club, which is kind of the events that they have run by our friend Chelsea Homer. If you're in a mixed faith marriage, the Marriage on a Tightrope podcast can be really, really valuable as well. So I just wanted to make sure people know about those resources. And we'll try and include links to all those things in our show notes.
Super.
Margie, it's so lovely to have you as my co-pilot.
It was such a great one. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Margie. It was really
We're
good
glad.
to be here.
Thanks for asking
Thanks
us.
for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks again. You guys are amazing. And this has been really special. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And thanks to everyone for joining us on Mormon Stories today. If you value this content and want to see it continue, you can go to mormonstories.org and become a monthly donor. And for as long as you'll support us, we'll keep doing this work.
Can I say one more thing,
Yeah,
John?
please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Our daughter Sal is a coming out coach.
Yeah.
She helps people come out of religion, a high demand religion like Mormonism, or come out of the closet.
Yeah.
She does
As LGBTQ, right? Yeah.
She does one-on-one counseling. They have retreats. Their next one is in the fall at Park City.
That's great.
She has a podcast called Peace Out Podcast. And anybody would benefit by following her, by listening to that. But especially if you have something big in your life that you're trying to, if you're worried about telling your parents one of these hard decisions, she's the girl to go to. So
What's the website? What's Sal's website?
I think it's Sal and Lena. There's also a new YouTube page YouTube channel called the Rainbow Squad, which is what the 7 kids call themselves. And they have that up and going.
It's sallyandlena.com, I think.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
And
sorry.
I'll
And
check
then
that out for sure and
Coming
give you
Out
that
Coach
for the
on
show
Instagram.
notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on YouTube, you're saying it's Rainbow?
The Rainbow Squad.
Rainbow Squad. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll try and include
And
all that.
it's the shenanigans of their 7 little kids who are like it's a circus 24 hours a day at their house.
Cute little kids. Really cute.
And Lena's doing some stuff on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Lena, Sally's on Instagram as the coming out coach. Lena is on Instagram as becoming Lena. Lena is a Kundalini yoga teacher, which if you don't know what Kundalini is, it's kind of a spiritual type of yoga. She's amazing. She's an energy healer. She does a lot for people. So she also does one-on-one help for people. And the 2 of them together put on these retreats that have turned out to be a phenomenal success. So I recommend both of them highly.
All right. Beautiful.
Okay.
Hi, Sal and Lena. You guys take care. And thanks so much, Nan and Rod. It's so fun to have you all here on the Wasatch Front.
Thanks.
Let's
to
have
be
lots
here.
of fun together.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Margie. Love you. See y'all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.